Hi, I'm Carys.
And I'm Maya Goodfellow.
Every week, I talk about the stories in the news that are over-reported and the ones that are going completely under the radar and not being talked about enough.
This is Over the Top, Under the Radar.
This week, we have the brilliant Maya Goodfellow co-hosting the show. I'm really excited to have you on, Maya. And for those of you who don't know Maya, she's an academic, author, and political commentator who is currently a presidential fellow at City University. Her work focuses on racial capitalism, immigration and bordering, politics of international development, and animal rights. Hi, Maya.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. How's your week been?
Okay, I'm sort of adjusting to what is now 6 months of darkness.
Yeah.
In terms of the light. I mean, also in terms of my mood. Yeah, I feel like we were being slowly eased in and now I'm freezing cold. And
Yeah, it switched flipped, didn't it? It was like autumn, bright, sunny, and now it's just freezing cold and everyone's miserable.
yes.
So I want to jump into the over the top and under the radar. So we both picked two stories from the news this week, one that we think has been over-reported and one that we think has flown over the radar. And I thought that you could go first and tell us one of your overs or unders.
Okay, so my over the top this week is Donald Trump, which I mean maybe could be an over the top for a lot of weeks of the last how many years. But obviously the major news story this week is actually the long overdue ceasefire in Gaza. The reason why I sort of chose Trump or thought Trump is like the thing that was getting me most irritated is because of the initial reporting in particular. So on Monday morning, I woke up and listened to the initial reporting about ceasefire, and all I heard was Donald Trump has done this and Donald Trump has done this. Donald Trump is now on his way, like flying across the world to the Middle East. We're going to track his flight and we're waiting with bated breath until he arrives in the Middle East. And obviously, there's an understandable way of seeing that or a way of interpreting that, which is that, you know, he's played a decisive role in something that is significant. But he's done so alongside, you know, Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, who have engaged with Hamas and done some of that work as well. And the way he is taking personal credit, like the nature of how he takes the personal credit as well, it just really feels like the reporting has played into that a lot. And so it's not to say that he hasn't played a role and we should talk about that, unpick that, try and make sense of it. What does it mean actually for long-term stability, a ceasefire that lasts beyond days? But it's this kind of weird obsession that I think the media have with him. In one way, it isn't weird because it's like clickbaity, and also he is the president of the United States. But in another way is like there's this like breathless reporting of like, what has he done now? Let us track his movements. And he said this thing that is crazy. And it's like, okay, yes, report on the thing, but don't make it into this spectacle because that's exactly what he's wanting to do, right? I don't know if you found it as similar at all.
I think, yeah, it's interesting you sort of put name to something that has been troubling me, but I haven't sort of unpicked. It's that, because also like Trump's a show, but he's been a show for years now. Like it's not actually a new show. None of this is new. He takes credit for everything. I mean, specifically with the ceasefire and the sort of talks between Israel and Palestine, we know that he wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He did not get it this year. But I guess there's something to me that really sticks in the craw, that this guy who's like his own biggest self-promoter and his own like one-man hype man, who's surrounded himself with like yes men and women who, you know, permanently takes credit for everything, that the media kind of uncritically has played into that with this, of just this like, well, he's done this, you know, huge, amazing thing. And like a ceasefire is a good thing. I'm sure everyone listening to this is happy that there's a ceasefire. We hope that it holds. There's already sort of talk that already Israel's restricting aid to Gaza. It's barely begun to return to the region. Already Israel's saying that all of the hostages' bodies haven't been returned. So like how long the ceasefire holds, we don't know. We're recording this on Wednesday evening. You'll be listening to it on a Friday morning. Maybe things will have changed. But yeah, that sort of uncritical, like no interrogation of what Trump actually did. And you're right, like a very breathless, oh, he's sort of made history. It's just like everyone's bought his hype.
Yeah, and I also felt like from a very like basic point of view, as someone who was just sort of listening to the news, and kind of consuming it as just as a listener, like momentarily. On that Monday morning, I really was like, there is so little substance here to what the discussion actually is. And I'm none the wiser. I guess I can go away and read more in depth about this, but it just feels like it felt like the information that I wanted wasn't there. And then also this kind of spectacle, it feels quite callous when we think about the scale of the death and the destruction. And obviously, part of the reason for the nature of that reporting is that Israel has not allowed international journalists in Gaza since the 7th of October. And there has been lots of like ways that journalists internationally have tried to get around that and engage with journalists within Gaza, many of whom have also been killed. That aside, it still felt like there was this big disconnect between, okay, yes, the ceasefire is definitely needed, but A, it's fragile, B, it's a first step. Like no one, very first step. And C, it doesn't erase everything that's happened to this point and all the people who have been killed whilst the world has been watching on, like so many of our leaders. It's not to say let's ignore the role that Trump has played entirely, but it's like the spectacle nature of it, given the seriousness of actually what we're talking about.
No, I think you're completely right. And I felt that too, that sort of having like casting around to try and get the detail. I can get hundreds of like stories about Trump's cover story in Time magazine. He doesn't like I think he doesn't like the pictures.
Yeah,
It's like I mean, to be fair to him, no one looks good when they're shot sort of from below. It like, gives you like, makes you jowly. So I get it, but like really easy to find stories about that and about his speech in the Israeli parliament and people wearing MAGA hats and like the sort of theater of it, but less on the substance of the deal. Yeah, less. I mean, I sort of was like thinking, where are the news sites that will give me a different perspective? Like went on Al Jazeera, obviously looked at the Guardian's coverage, but that, those images of what Gaza looks like now and what it looked like 2 years ago are so stark. And I don't know that they aren't as important as another bloody picture of Donald Trump.
It's so true. And it's like, even thinking about like you say, it's not like none of the reporting is there. There is reporting there, but it's the prominence that's given to him, and especially that initial prominence. Like there's so much coverage of like the celebrations in Israel of him and like how popular he is now in comparison to Netanyahu. Okay, fine, but let's also talk about the fact that the IDF still occupies 53% of Gaza. On Tuesday, they killed a reported 7 Palestinians. Like, some of that hadn't happened on Monday morning, yes, but the kind of fragility of it was quite evident. And so I think Trump is a story, but not in the way that it's been covered, and he's not the only story.
On this issue, more than many issues, it has felt like a lot of mainstream media coverage has this big disconnect with a lot of public opinion. And I think we've seen it in terms of looking at opinion polling, like just looking in the UK at public attitudes to the situation in Gaza over the last 2 years, and the way that understandably there was like a lot of sympathy for Israel in the immediate wake of October the 7th. And I mean, sort of YouGov have tracked this over the last 2 years. There has been like British attitudes have clearly shifted. The question that YouGov asked was, which side in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict do you sympathize with more? And the Palestinian side has pretty consistently ticked up over the course of the last 2 years. And that is because so many of us are opening our phones and opening social media and seeing what has been done to Palestinians, what has been done in Gaza. And then it feels like the elite conversation, the media conversation, is completely disconnected with that. And that we have all seen a genocide unfold, but yeah, we're having to like search out information on it. And then the headlines this week are about, I mean, not even just Trump. I had to listen to some podcast that was going on about Tony Blair and how he was like, people around Tony Blair briefing to journalists that he'd been really key, just like Trump is briefing to journalists that he'd been really key. And you're like, cool, great. And this sort of, I get there's always like a great man theory of history. And it's, the world is just a bunch of white guys just sorting shit out. But I just was like, really? Is this what we're getting?
We don't need Blair back. When Blair is back, which is all the time,
all the time.
Not good.
Yeah. So my over the top is the Epstein scandal. Specifically, this week, 2 right-wing papers splashed with another Epstein revelation. Basically, they found leaked emails from Prince Andrew that show that despite him claiming in his 2019 Newsnight interview that he severed all ties with Jeffrey Epstein. He actually emailed him 3 months afterwards. I mean, this story didn't get a ton of coverage. It's been picked up by like most newspapers, and The Sun and the Mail have obviously run loads with it. I think my objection to this, I've been trying to think about how I can explain what has annoyed me about it. Number one, I just think the Prince Andrew stuff, it's 2019 that we had that ridiculous interview where he claimed he didn't sweat and he was in Pizza Express when something happened. And so this idea like, oh, we've now got the smoking gun, we've now got proof that he lied. It's like he's been pretty consistently lying about stuff. And like, I would say most people with common sense have been like, yeah, he's not really telling the full story for upwards of 5 years now. So this like proof he's lied. And then sure, the email's gross. We're in this together is one of the things he says. And we'll play together again, like absolutely rank, vile. But I think most of us at this point know that, yeah, it's all pretty rotten. So I find that annoying. And it just feels like it's come hot on the heels of just like months and weeks of these like revelations from the Epstein files. So like all of the discovery documents that they have in the US, things that get leaked. And like, obviously it's an important story. I feel like all the media reporting is on the least important bits. The picture that Trump drew for his birthday card and he signed his name in a black Sharpie, and, you know, the tone of the email, or Mandelson got Epstein to meet Tony Blair and like, you know, like 20 years ago. And like, I just think at this point, we know there were a bunch of really high profile people who associated with Epstein before and after his criminal conviction. And there's lots of people who have been alleged to have been not just meeting him, but going on his awful plane to his awful island. And they're pretty much across the political spectrum. Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Bill Clinton. And I guess I don't think it's news anymore to like uncover some email or scrap of paper or proof that this paedophile had a very impressive black book of high profile and powerful, rich and famous people. And that even after he'd gone to prison, wasn't really discredited amongst them. So I just like, it doesn't feel like news, or it doesn't feel like an important part of the news. And then I think there's like a couple of other things that really annoy me. And like one is about a month ago, some of Epstein's survivors gave a press conference in DC. Obviously, it's a few months ago since one of Jeffrey Epstein's most high profile survivors committed suicide. And like, this is a story where we consistently look at the perpetrators and the like associates of this perpetrator. We don't really spend very much time on the victims and sort of their experience. Yeah, and like if you look at the victims' press conference, it barely got any coverage compared to like just, I don't know, a handwritten note from Trump. And that feels wrong and off. And then I guess the other thing I'm really looking for, similarly to you, that I'm like hungry for in the reporting is women and girls, and like women and girls' safety is so weaponized in our politics at the moment. And we're told that all of these people, migrants, asylum seekers, trans people, we need to be worried about women's safety. And like the proven reality is that women and girls are unsafe, and they're unsafe when it's rich and powerful men. And there's no accountability for them. There's no accountability for any of these people. So yeah, I'm kind of over Epstein, although I do get the gossip is good, but I just feel a bit like, really? Prince Andrew is still pals with him? Does anyone really not believe that? Like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of all for bringing down Prince Andrew, and like also like thinking about, you know, I do think it's had kind of an impact on the royal family. And whilst yes, we still have a royal family, it's not done its damage. I think.
Yeah, you're right. That's
I
true.
think that it has and it should have, but I do agree there is a sort of problem with this kind of consistent reporting of more revelations about these individuals. Okay, but what does it tell us? And so exactly what you're saying is like it seems like when we see working class people, or what I don't know what politicians would call ordinary people, as ordinary folk, and like those extraordinary, like doing something that is considered to be illegal or deemed to be criminal, it's often casted as sort of innate fault of the whole class, or where the social political context is totally ignored. And when it's the elite, it is covered, but it's more covered as if it's there, like basically a few wrong uns in the car, you know, a few bad apples. and the social and political context again gets overlooked, but for like the opposite reason. And so I feel it never gets to the heart of what it is that we're talking about. And that seems to me to be the problem with, if we think about something like Me Too as well, is like that had an impact. It was meaningful. Absolutely wouldn't say that it wasn't. But then where does it go? Where do we go with that? Where further do we go with it? And what is the role of press in that? You always hear about these figures who are in the media, who wield quite a large amount of power, and then it comes out that they've committed child sexual abuse, or they've been abusive towards women, or sexually abusive towards people kind of in their orbit, and everyone's like, oh yeah, people knew. And you think, who else knows? Like, who is there now who everyone knows about but isn't kind of, and that's, to me, is why is it that only some of that comes out and not all of it?
I want to say a big thank you to Alesh, who became a Patreon member this week, and to Natasha, who upgraded their membership. Thank you so much for your generosity. It means a lot. This podcast is funded by our Patreon community. That's a few hundred people who give a few pounds each month to cover our production costs. It means the show can be independent and that we don't have to chase clicks or advertising. If you've been listening for a while and you're thinking about supporting the show, now is a really good time. Patrons get a bonus episode every week, advance notice of special guests, and the chance to suggest questions for them. You also get invited to our exclusive Over Under WhatsApp community, where you can connect with other listeners of the show. The WhatsApp community has a life of its own. There are meetups, there's a shared Spotify playlist, people share articles, ask questions, rant, laugh. It's honestly one of my favourite parts of making the show. For the price of a cup of coffee every month, you can support independent left-wing media. Every single donation really counts. To sign up to support us today, go to patreon.com/overthetop under the radar, or just hit the link in the show notes. Thing that I think has gone a bit under the radar, I feel like listeners might have heard of it, but it's only been picked up by a couple of outlets, is the Green Party, led now by Zach Polanski, has really increased its membership, and it's now got more than 100,000 members in the UK. So as of the 15th of October, there are 112,000 members of the Green Party. So it's the fourth biggest political party now. So Labour is the biggest, around 300,000. Reform has about 260,000 members. The Conservatives don't ever release their membership data, but they have about 120,000 members. It's unclear, but so Green Party are like nipping at the Conservatives' heels, and they've got more members than the Lib Dems, who have, I think, 60,000 members. So the party has gone from early September, 30,000 members, to more than 100,000. So I think this story's gone under the radar. It's only been picked up by, The Guardian, the New Statesman, a couple of outlets. I think the thing that I am finding frustrating is that even with this surge in membership, and, Zach Polanski, I think, is, he's speaking everywhere, he's done Question Time, I think there's still this like media disinterest. I don't know if it's distaste in covering the Greens. So like we had this mammoth, month and a bit of party conferences, and all of the lobby and political reporters, they went to Manchester, they went to Liverpool, they were at the Reform UK conference, they were at the Lib Dem conference. I didn't see many political reporters at the Green Party conference, even though they've got, a record number of MPs and a new leader. And similarly, and I know that lots of Green Party members have complained about this, Laura Kuenssberg, who hosts the BBC's kind of Sunday political show, had every single party leader on before their conference, other than Zach Polanski. So, this has sort of developed that's also flown under the radar. But so now the BBC have relented, and they are going to have Zach Polanski on the Sunday show, but Laura Kuenssberg will be on holiday. So it'll be Victoria Derbyshire, who I'm sure is also going to be brilliant. But that idea that like the Green Party don't deserve equal billing with the other political leaders, I think is frustrating, because I think it shows like a media distaste for covering the large number of people in the UK that are left wing. And also I think it kind of, we're in this space now where there's a very strong chance that Reform UK will be one of the largest political parties at the next election. And the way that the media is like enabling reform and platforming reform, I think is increasing the chance of that. And an outlet like the BBC not putting the Green Party on a par with the Lib Dems, Labour, Reform, the Conservatives, it's sort of delegitimizing of Polanski and the 100,000 plus people that have joined the party because he's become leader. So yeah, they're my under the radar for this week. I don't know if you saw the story or whether you think the Greens aren't getting enough coverage.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hate party conferences and it's tedious in so many ways. But it's true, again, sort of as a more just like having the radio on in the background. The amount I heard about Conservative Party conference, Reform, Labour was great. It was significant. I didn't even hear anything about the Greens. It obviously was covered, but just not in the same way. And I think that it is telling if you flipped a script and it was Reform that were doing what the Greens are doing now, which is like there's been this big influx of people and big interest, and there's like a lot of interest and excitement around this new leader who is quite clearly taking the party in like a specific direction that is not like a massive break from what's come before, but definitely rhetorically, definitely in terms of the style of his politics and like his willingness to say what shouldn't be bold things but are in UK politics. You would probably have a lot of journalists rushing out to go and talk to all these new Reform members about why it is, what is it of their disenfranchised, or what is it that's driven them to join this political party that seems to have a new lease of life. And there just seems to be, I don't know if it's like the Greens and the kind of image that they have as this kind of middle class party. I mean, it's not, it's not without its truth. I don't know now in terms of the members like that. It's not like it's without its flaws as a political party. I mean, what party isn't flawed? But when you think about the way that UKIP before Nigel Farage was at Reform were sort of covered, and that also the demographics of who made up who was voting UKIP was way more complicated than being this left behind that was often talked about in the media. You often had people who own their own homes or own their own small businesses and have done pretty well out of Thatcherism and whatnot, who are fairly comfortable but being depicted in this particular way. And it seems that it's the way that the media want to read those people. They want to read them as a particular part of the working class, and we can debate whether that's the case. And so I also feel like that it's reflective of this media idea that, which is true, which is that the media is like dominated by people who are privately educated, wealthy, like overly white, male, and to represent the people, they think that's what Nigel Farage does, but that could never be the case for a Green Party. And I think that that's wrong. They should go and look and talk to some of the people, who are these young people that are getting engaged with the Greens, who are these people that have joined the party? And there's no curiosity about that, or I haven't seen much curiosity about that. And that to me is maybe reflective a bit of the state of the media.
Yeah, and I think that, Cardiff University actually did a study about a month ago. They just specifically looked at the BBC's coverage of Reform. They did an analysis and a comparison, and they found, so it was between January and July of this year, they found that Reform featured in 49 bulletins at the News of 10, in the News at 10. Lib Dems, who obviously have 72 MPs, were in 17% of the bulletins with 35 references. And the study also found that Reform was referenced in just under a fifth of ITV News at 10 bulletins compared to 6% for the Lib Dems. So, they use the Lib Dems as a comparison point here. And they said on ITV, Reform was being covered 3 times more. Other thing the study found was that in under a fifth of cases, there was no analysis of Reform policies or claims. It was just sort of straight reporting. They were rigorously scrutinised in just under 4 in 10 cases, and to some extent in another 4 in 10 cases. But this idea that, it isn't just perception, it isn't just what you're hearing when you turn on the radio, Reform are getting more coverage. And that, the other thing they found, which is really powerful when you have the telly on and maybe you're making a cup of tea or you're washing up, more than 2/3 of references to Reform featured some footage of its politicians. So like Farage in a pub, the classic. So I think, the BBC pushed back on the research and, said they're not trying to ingratiate themselves with Reform, but we can see that like the right-wing side of the story, and for me, the story is there is a breakaway from the established political parties and a surge on the right and the left. The data we have suggests that Reform are getting more coverage. And then I think the other thing that you've really touched on is the Green surge is part of a bigger story, which is that thousands of people are flocking to this political party, which, as you say, hasn't substantively changed its position, but suddenly has this new leader who's really confidently articulating a more left-wing and populist position. And to the extent we have data, it looks like Labour and the Tories are hemorrhaging members. So, Labour List, which she used to work for, said that like Labour has lost more than 1 in 10 members since the 2024 general election. So, July last year, when Keir Starmer won his landslide, Labour had like 348,500 members. Now and we'll probably find out again with the new deputy leadership election, 309,000 members. So that's an 11.4% decrease in members. And according to Labour's National Executive Committee, so, Labour's own statistics, the party's youth membership has fallen to 30,000 from 100,000 5 years ago. So as you sort of hinted at, the story isn't just the change in members. It's like who's moving from where. Is the Green Party cementing its position as the party of young people? Like, if so, what does that mean? And yeah, it feels like there's a lot to dig into. The Conservative Party's membership, I mean, they're notoriously quite secretive about their membership, so it's hard to get official stats. But as far as we can tell, and it's been reported in, The Spectator and right-wing news outlets, the Tory Party membership has also fallen since Kemi Badenoch became leader. So there is an interesting story, and people who join political parties aren't representative of all voters. They're representative of people who are extra enthusiastic, like you and me. But I think there is a bigger story here about what shifts are happening in British politics. And by not even covering the Green story, you're then not able to dig into the bigger picture. And I guess even in a time when their trust in all of our institutions is falling, I think you can't underestimate the legitimacy that it gives a political party to have that BBC interview, to be on the News at 10 bulletin every single day. And we'll never know because there's no way of doing a like-for-like experiment. But what would the impact be if Zach Polanski was treated with the same seriousness that Nigel Farage was?
Exactly, and that's the thing with Farage. Evidently, where we are now as a reform have a lot of support, and people are enthusiastic about the section of society, and it's something to take seriously. But Farage has been in the game for a long time, and I do think that the media has had a role to play. They say, "Oh, we're just covering it," but actually, you're also consistently platforming him. If you go back and look at like the nature of the coverage that he's had. And yeah, he played into that. He did all those stunts like flying in that plane or whatever. And yes, he helped to cultivate that. He's obviously very savvy in terms of the media, but it's not like it came from nowhere and they just had to platform him. It's like they consistently kept giving him a platform, and that helped him to make the spread, that kind of say the things that he did and say the things that he does, which it's helped build his brand, right? And so there is a problem there. If you're going to afford that to some people when their actual interest in their party is quite low, which it was for UKIP at the time, and then you aren't going to kind of engage with other political leaders when actually the interest is already much higher because of their own kind of organising.
Yeah, and then you sort of end up in this weird, like, vicious cycle, death spiral where it's like, well, we have to cover them because, there's like loads of people that are interested in them. But it's like, but people are interested in them because you're always covering them. And like,
Yeah,
I mean, the
exactly.
reform, like reform's poll numbers are real and scary. They're still just poll numbers. And its victories in the recent local elections are also real. But like, you can make a case that the Lib Dems' huge surge in MPs or the Greens' huge surge in members and like exponential sort of growth in election victories are also stories. They're just not, as you say, stories that journalists seem to want to tell. Yeah, I think how politicians are covered in platform didn't shape how we saw them and like what we thought of them. And, for the Greens, their biggest challenge by their own account is for people to take them seriously. We take Farage so incredibly seriously, even when he's being ridiculous. And Zach Polanski, it doesn't seem like he's getting that hearing, and it's not clear what he would have to do to get that hearing. I mean, those membership numbers are insane. That's like wild growth. He is saying something different. He's maybe not as like, maybe he's not sat in a pub with a pint or like chain smoking like Farage, but he is saying things that are interesting and different to other leaders, and it's not kind of enough. And I think, yeah, it's sort of further confirmation that it isn't just, that there's a lot of prejudice and groupthink that goes into political coverage. So that's my under the radar. What have you got that's flown under our radar this week?
Yeah, so my under the radar this week is to do with a very small town in Spain where a town council basically approved unanimously across the party lines to ask the central government to pursue a proposal that's been suggested in Spain to regularize undocumented migrants. This isn't the first time that Spain has at least briefly been in the UK press. I mean, we don't often follow what's going on in other parts of the world apart from America very much, but it has been periodically reported that in Spain there is a there's a kind of shift, at least if you look at it in comparison to the rest of large parts of the rest of Europe, there's been this interesting shift of Spain actually saying, the Spanish PM saying, we need to choose between being an open and prosperous country or a closed off and poor one. And this in this town in Spain where this town council vote passed, the mayor went further and it's like more heartening, which is that this isn't just about economics, it's a question of humanity. And for me, the reason why it's the under the radar is because it is a glimmer of some kind of hope in what is an incredibly bleak kind of landscape. And so the reason why what that mayor was said was so nice is that the town is a place that a lot of people have migrated to because they have a big agricultural sector. They produce something like 70% of all of the mushrooms born in Spain. But they basically there's a lot of people who are classed as migrants who go to this town and get work there. They've got like now a very diverse population, and it hasn't been the backlash that we're often told increased amounts of immigration creates. And so the idea that an increase in immigration is the reason for anti-immigration politics is clearly, I mean, in this instance, it doesn't carry weight. More broadly, it never carries weight because it ignores the broader political context of anti-immigration politics, just as an aside. But I think here, it's really what heartened me is that the mayor was saying, okay, yes, there's this economic bit, but actually we just want to treat people like human beings. And so with all of this, kind of a caveat of like Spain is really focusing on the economics. Like it's really like we need these people to come and work and we need them to help with our aging economy. And whilst there is like a truth to that in terms of how most economies are structured across Europe, I will also kind of bristle at it because we shouldn't just be treating people like we shouldn't be granting people rights or like, I mean, even granting people rights, that language, bestowing of rights upon people. We shouldn't be, recognizing people's basic humanity based on what they contribute to the economy. But I do think that what it shows is that it doesn't have to be the way that it is like here in Germany, in large parts of Europe. To me, this could be the way that Spain's talking about immigration or this town, and it's being spoken about in this town, could be, if you push hard enough, a first step towards a kind of better and more open discourse, but also top policy when it comes to people moving across borders. So there's hope with some caveats.
Well, and I think the town is called Maya. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting under the radar. I hadn't heard about it or seen it anywhere. I think especially because this is not just saying migration is good. Migration is good. It's about giving papers and legitimacy to undocumented, or in the right-wing parlance, like illegal migrants. And I think that does feel pretty rare, this sense of like, just in the way that we have like deserving and undeserving poor, I don't know that there is any deserving category of migrant anymore. But like this sense that, the worst of the worst are the people that have come here illegally and don't have papers. And, that's what we all need to worry about. So I think it feels like countercultural to hear and sort of quite special that it's for people who haven't maybe arrived in Spain legally, but still saying, well, they're contributing and they should be able to be here legitimately.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like with all the language around illegal immigrants and people who are like coming to take jobs, and there's really this figure across large parts of Europe of people who are crossing borders without papers. And the reason that they're doing so is because those borders are incredibly difficult to cross. And so actually you've got to be in most countries to claim asylum, for instance, and there's no way to get into like a country like the UK, or there's very few routes to do so. There are critiques in the migration sector of regularizing people's status, which is that you don't go to the heart of why people become undocumented in the first place. But I do think, as you say, against this landscape of where the figure of the so-called illegal immigrant, which totally ignores how people are legalized through the laws that governments create, it does go against the grain of that, and that is promising to me. And I just think anything that is someone saying, let's just treat each other like human beings, it sounds so basic, I know, and it just, but it is, we're so far down the terrible path.
We're so far away from
that
that. Yeah.
actually it is really meaningful to hear people say that, but then try to push for things that will realize that as well. And I think for the people, I mean, I don't know, because it'd be really interesting. This is why it's under the radar. It'd be really interesting to like hear reporting from that town and where they engage with some of these people who have moved to this place, hear what it's like, hear what their lives like, hear what their like moods like. Because if it's positive, that to me just does give me hope that it's not a given that we are going to end up where we are. And that's what a lot of the positive, like far right, but also actually mainstream politicians say, is like, it's an inevitability that people are going to dislike immigration when you have immigration of a certain level. And this suggests that's not true.
Okay, well, tiny ray of hope from a small Spanish town. And you've been a lovely ray of hope and sunshine today, Maya. It's been lovely chatting to you. Thanks for being on the show.
That. Great.
I've enjoyed it. Plus, you recommended me a TV show. So that's,
yes, I can always do that.
What we're in the market for. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you for listening to Over the Top, Under the Radar. Please remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you haven't read Maya's phenomenal book, Hostile Environment, How Immigrants Became Scapegoats, you can pick up a copy now, any good bookshops. And if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/over the top, under the radar, or you can follow us on social media at over_pod_. See you next week.